Now, up until now, the OnePlus 6 has been enjoying pretty much unfettered success simply because it's the most powerful Android phone you can buy at its price point. Now, add to that the great build quality and a very capable set of cameras, and you have yourself a very good all-rounder that doesn't cost a whole lot. Now, there hasn't been any real challenges to the OnePlus 6 until now. The Asus Zenfone 5Z is a new entrant in the market, and the company has managed to upstage the OnePlus 6 by giving it an even more aggressive pricing. The phone starts at 29,999 rupees, which is 5,000 lesser than what the OnePlus 6 starts at for the same RAM and storage variant. Now, a lower pricing alone doesn't necessarily make the 5Z a better pick, which is why we'll be comparing some of the main features of both these phones to help you decide which one you should pick. Now, design and aesthetics are very subjective matters, and in our opinion, both phones score well thanks to their metal and glass bodies. They feel premium and at the same time are also big fingerprint magnets. Now, we found the button placement on the OnePlus 6 to be a bit more ergonomic, as the volume rocker is on the opposite side of the power button, which makes it easier to use with one hand. Now, the OnePlus 6 also has a clear lead when it comes to weather resistance, as it's designed to survive light splashes of water, whereas the Zenfone 5 on the other hand doesn't really have any moisture protection. The OnePlus 6 sports a physical slider too for switching between different ringing profiles, which is very convenient. Now, if we were to pick a winner, we'd go with the Zenfone 5Z for a couple of good reasons. It's noticeably lighter than the OnePlus 6, so you don't really feel as much fatigue in your hands even after holding it for long durations. This is handy if you tend to read or play a lot of games. It's also a tiny bit shorter than the OnePlus 6, which makes it feel a bit more compact when you hold it. Now, one of the reasons the OnePlus 6 is so popular is that it has Qualcomm's best SoC that no other smartphone has managed to match up until now. The Zenfone 5Z also has the same Snapdragon 845 SoC, which puts both phones on an equal footing. Now, the OnePlus 6 still manages slightly higher scores in some benchmarks such as AnTuTu, but with actual usage, it's next to impossible to actually detect any difference between the two. Now, the base variant of both phones have 6GB of RAM and 64GB of storage, whereas the OnePlus 6 offers 8GB of RAM if you pick the 128GB model. Now, both companies also offer an 8GB RAM and 256GB storage option, but there's a huge pricing difference between the 5Z and the OnePlus 6. Asus has priced its top-end version at 36,999 rupees, whereas if you want the same RAM and storage configuration on the OnePlus 6, you'll have to shell out 43,999 rupees. Now, you don't get wireless charging on both phones despite the glass back, but other features include NFC, Bluetooth 5, dual-band Wi-Fi AC, and a similar assortment of sensors. Now, the fingerprint sensors on both phones are easy to reach, but authentication is a little quicker on the OnePlus 6. This applies to face recognition too, which works a tad faster. Now, the Zenfone 5Z also has stereo speakers, which the OnePlus 6 lacks. Now, granted, the earpiece doesn't really offer the same volume level or audio fidelity as a dedicated speaker, but some semblance of a stereo effect is better than none at all. Finally, the Zenfone 5Z also supports expandable storage with a hybrid dual SIM slot, which is still something many look forward to when buying a phone. The OnePlus 6 on the other hand has fixed storage which can't be expanded. Now, both phones have similarly sized 19:9 aspect ratio displays with the same Full HD Plus resolution and a notch at the top. The panels on both phones are quite different though. The OnePlus uses an AMOLED panel, whereas Asus uses an IPS LCD one. Both offer very good viewing angles, saturated colors, and support the wider DCI P3 color gamut. There really is a negligible amount of difference in quality between the two, even when you're looking at them side by side. The OnePlus 6 has slightly deeper blacks, which is one of the advantages of having an AMOLED panel. In terms of performance, both phones are great at multitasking and don't really have any heating issues even with stressful apps. The Snapdragon 845 chews through even the most graphically intensive games. Popular online multiplayer games such as PUBG, which is graphically demanding, had no trouble running at the highest settings. Both phones also have dual 4G with dual VoLTE support. Now, unlike the OnePlus 6, the Zenfone 5Z ships with a headset in the box, and it's a pretty good one too. The Zenio Pro high-res certified headphones sound great, and the phone itself supports high-resolution audio playback along with DTS Headphone X enhancements. You also get FM radio, which is missing in the OnePlus 6. For software, the two companies have taken quite different approaches to their custom UIs. The OnePlus 6 runs on Oxygen OS, which is based on Android 8.1 Oreo. You get some customizations in the form of gestures and a reading mode, which switches to a monochrome color scheme. But overall, the interface has a minimalistic look which closely resembles stock Android. Zen UI in the Zenfone 5Z is based on Android 8 Oreo, and while it lacks the same minimalistic look, it's still very snappy. The company is banking on AI enhancements to help it stand out from the competition, and while not all of them actually use machine learning to work, some of them, such as AI photo learning and AI charging, do. Now, looking ahead in terms of Android updates, the OnePlus 6 has a better chance of getting Android P before the 5Z simply because the phone is already part of Google's Android P beta program. For the Zenfone 5Z, ASUS hasn't really announced any roadmap for Android 8.1 or even Android P officially. So even though it might eventually get Android P, the real question is when. Now, both smartphones offer the option to hide the notch if you don't like it. However, the OnePlus has a more polished solution, whereas the Zenfone 5Z's software ends up looking a bit crude. Now, the OnePlus 6 and the Zenfone 5Z will both typically last you an entire day on a single charge, and in our battery tests, we managed to get similar runtimes from both phones. Fast charging is supported through each phone's USB Type-C port. OnePlus uses its own dash charging technology, while ASUS sticks to Qualcomm's Quick Charge 3.0 feature. Both can top up a fully drained battery to roughly 50% in about half an hour. Now, the OnePlus 6 has a good set of cameras which we found to rival those of even more expensive flagships in our camera comparison. However, just like with the pricing, ASUS seems to have exceeded OnePlus, and the Zenfone 5Z manages to edge out the OnePlus 6 in terms of photo quality. Despite its lower 12-megapixel resolution compared to the 16-megapixel resolution on the OnePlus 6, the Zenfone 5Z captures slightly better details and colors in landscape shots. In macros, photos from the Zenfone 5Z appear to have sharper edges, lesser grain, and better detail. Now, this could also be attributed to the larger pixels of the Zenfone 5Z sensor. You also get optical image stabilization on both phones. In indoors and low light shots, the 5Z captures slightly brighter images, and while shooting landscapes at night, the 5Z once again does a slightly better job with white balance, although details in the shots taken by both phones are very similar. Now, keeping in line with today's smartphone trends, both of them have secondary cameras, but the 8-megapixel one in the Zenfone 5Z is more useful as it has a wide-angle lens compared to the 20-megapixel sensor in the OnePlus 6, whose only real use is calculating depth. There's portrait mode on both phones, and in this case, we found the OnePlus 6 to do a slightly better job with edge detection. The 16-megapixel selfie camera on the OnePlus 6 is able to capture slightly better details thanks to its higher resolution, which is especially useful in low light. However, the Zenfone 5Z does manage punchier colors even in poor lighting. Both phones support 4K video recording up to 60 FPS as well as 1080p video at 240 FPS for slow motion. Video quality is good under most lighting conditions, and both phones do a decent job with electronic stabilization even at 4K. The Zenfone 5Z has an advantage over the OnePlus 6 in that it doesn't impose any time limits when recording 4K at 30 or 60 FPS, but it does get quite hot if you shoot for more than 8 to 10 minutes. Now, barring a few things like water resistance and maybe being on the latest version of Android, the ASUS Zenfone 5Z does everything the OnePlus 6 does, and sometimes does it better. It's lighter, ships with a high-quality headset, has a useful set of AI features, and offers very good camera performance with a more useful secondary camera. The icing on the top has got to be the price, which is 5,000 rupees lower than the OnePlus 6. It's pretty obvious that the ASUS Zenfone 5Z offers tremendous value at around 30,000 rupees, and that's the one we'd recommend. So thanks for watching our comparison, and for all things tech, log on to gadgets360.com.